Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Power Parsha Pearls. This week, we're looking at the portion of Toldos. And Toldos is a fascinating portion in as much as it introduces us in the first instance to the two brothers, Yaakov and Esav. And what we know about these two brothers, Yaakov and Esav, essentially, is that they were what you might call diametrically opposite. And it raises the whole question about the nature-nurture big question insofar as how we raise our children. By definition, many people raise the issue about where does a child like Esau come from? The Torah begins in the first instance by making a very deliberate point in telling us these are the children of Yitzchak, the son of Abraham. Avraham begot Yitzchak. Why the very deliberate double emphasis? And the answer is because in the first instance, people always assumed that, or people deliberately sought to mock and suggest that maybe Avraham is not really Yitzchak's father. Maybe, considering how for so many years Sarah didn't have any children, and then at a certain point she was kidnapped by the king Abimelech, perhaps Abimelech was really Yitzchak's father. So God makes a very deliberate point of making Yitzchak look identical to his father. Yitzchak, the son of Abraham, Avraham begot Yitzchak. The double emphasis to say that they were identical. They almost look like twins, to a point where Avraham at that moment asked of God that he should ensure that because he's that much older, he should look older. In other words, if you want to know where you get your wrinkles from, or where you get your white hair from, or where you might actually get the whole looking older from, it's actually on account of this. Yitzchak and Avraham, people were confusing them. God did that deliberately, that they looked so identical on account of the fact that he wanted to emphasize this is the son of Abraham, not Avimelech. And nevertheless, people, because they were confusing, Abraham asked of God, please ensure that I should look that much older, even as we might otherwise look alike. But then comes Esav. Yitzchak has children, and of his two children, one of them is Esau, and a wicked, malevolent child. And so once again, people are saying, aha, you see, we told you. I mean, where does an Esav come from, if not for the fact that there's a bad gene being passed through on account of the fact that, that Sarah maybe became pregnant from Abimelech, had Yitzchak, and from Yitzchak it passes through to Esau. Thus says the Torah, Yitzchak, the son of Abraham, Abraham begot Yitzchak. The deliberate emphasis in the statement is to make the point that when it says the son of, it implies nature. When it says begot or had, it implies nurture. That Yitzchak was somebody who had Abraham's nature, and indeed, Abraham also nurtured Yitzchak through and through. So where does Esav come from? Thus continues the Torah telling us that Yitzchak married Rivka, the daughter of Besuel, the sister of Lavan. And Besuel and Lavan were actually real rogues. So there was a bad gene that was passed through. It was passed through from Rivka's side of the family. The key point that I'm looking to bring out from this is simply the fact that in as much as we do believe in inheriting nature from our parents, we also have the notion of nurture, which is, in other words, by definition, regardless of whatever your nature might in fact be, nevertheless, one has the ability to overcome it, to be nurtured in a completely different direction. And the truth of the matter is that Esau himself could have actually been a far better boy than he might have otherwise been, had he only been nurtured in an entirely different direction. And this is what I want to introduce you to right now. Our sages actually compare Esav to a pig. Imagine that. Of all things, I mean, this is the son of one of our forefathers. And our sages actually compare him to a pig. Why do they compare him to a pig? Because when the Torah introduces us to Yaakov and Esav, it tells us that Yaakov was an innocent man, sat in the tents, always involved himself in study. And Esau was a real rogue who used to dupe his father by asking him all kinds of complex halachic questions, just to make his father think that, look, see, this is a good boy, albeit that behind the scenes he was anything but. Comparing Esav to a pig is a very deliberate intent, because a pig is as non-kosher as they come, but always puts its front legs out whilst crouching down to show off its split hooves, as though to declare, look, I'm kosher. We know the two signs of any kosher animal are split hooves and chewing its cud. A pig is one of those rare animals that has one of the two signs, but not the other. And a pig, therefore, is always lying like this to show, look, I'm kosher, but in reality, of course, we know it's not. That was Esav. Esav was like a pig in the sense that always trying to portray himself to his father as though he's kosher. Hence, the verse tells us, and Yitzchak, Isaac, loved Esav. This wicked child charmed his way into his father's heart. And we have to ask ourselves one simple question. At the end of the day, Yitzchak was an astute businessman. Yitzchak was a highly intelligent individual. Yitzchak was very aware. He became fabulously wealthy on account of his business acumen. Are we really to assume that somehow this child was able to actually trick him? Is it truly likely that Esau, with some smooth talking, could really fool Yitzchak into thinking that he was such a good boy? And I suggest to you that Yitzchak was perfectly aware of his son's smooth tongue, belying his malicious heart. But what are we supposed to do when somebody goes bad? Do we just write them off as another statistic? Do we just ignore the opportunity to nurture? Do we become oblivious to the innate potential that lurks at the core of every single soul? Nature versus nurture is an age-old classic debate. Psychologists through the ages passionately arguing their individual theories. Judaism maintains it's a bit of both. Yes, again, there are inborn characteristics, as Esau had them, inherited from his mother's side of the family. But no one is inherently evil, rotten to the core, beyond redemption. There is a considerable element of nurture, even when the negative can be transformed into something positive, so long as we care enough to recognize it, to confront it, and to deal with it. So Yitzchak loved Esav, not because he was fooled by his devious dialect, but because it's okay to love despite the deceitfulness and the malevolence. In fact, it's only with love that you can ever hope to make a difference to somebody else's life. As per the quote from Machiavelli's The Prince, it is with the heart that one sees rightly. What is essential is invisible to the eye. And that's why it's actually quite interesting that the sages choose to deliberately use the analogy of a pig to describe Esau. Because these same sages actually tell us, yes, believe it or not, in Mashiach's times, the pig will return to become kosher. That's right. We'll then be able to really find out what all the ham and bacon fuss is about. In fact, the very Hebrew word for pig is chazir, meaning to return. Just as a pig will eventually return to become kosher, just as Yitzchak discovered the potential of returning, of turning back, of becoming kosher, of coming home within Esav as well. And let's be clear, by no means would it have been easy for Yitzchak to do this, to love in the way that he did someone like Esau. Our rabbis famously tell us the various different characteristics unique to the individual forefathers. Abraham, as we well know, represents the idea of chesed, kindness, compassion, always loving, always open home, always caring, always reaching out. Yitzchak was more of a recluse. We don't actually learn or read a whole lot about him. His primary attribute was that of gvura, strict discipline, toughness, might. So to have that kind of characteristic, strict discipline, as being his primary attribute, and nevertheless, when it comes to reaching out to the needy child, crying out for love, you've got to summon the strength and the patience, even when it may not come naturally. Let's remember, children need the attention. Children need the care. And children, by the way, is not defined by any age bracket, because ultimately we are all children. And you should know that two compelling consequences emerge as a direct result of Yitzchak's choice attitude. First, on the man-man level, it is said from the day that Esau evoked this compassion from his father, the Talmud says he assured that no righteous man would ever see real evil within their own children. Unless obviously somebody can sometimes be unwell and be a terribly abusive parent, but ordinarily speaking, a parent will always have this innate love towards their child, regardless of how rebellious the child might be. Which we can take to simply mean if Yitzchak can do it, even with a son as challenging as Esau, then we can all do it with one another. And secondly, the Talmud tells us that in the future, God will say, my children have misbehaved. They're undeserving of my compassion, of my mercy, and all the good and all the glory of the past will rise to beseech from on high for their children. But only Yitzchak will prevail, because Yitzchak will be able to step up and declare, I had compassion for my son, even as he was undeserving, so too you, God, should have compassion and show mercy to your children as well. There's a fascinating Talmudic tale about a king and a queen who were arguing over what was better food, goat meat or lamb. The king insisted that goat meat was certainly superior. The queen argued lamb is tastier and of superior quality. Who was going to decide the dispute? It was suggested that the decision be left to the then Kohen Gadol, the high priest. If anyone would be an expert on meat, it would be someone who brings daily sacrifices, sometimes goats, sometimes lamb, even other animals, and pretty much eating from most of them. So the high priest came and he listened to the arguments of the queen extolling the merits of the lamb. Then he heard what the king had to say about the advantages of a goat meat. And thereafter he looked to the king and he gestured with his hand like this and he said, God's instruction is that a daily sacrifice be brought from lamb. It says in the verse, you shall bring one lamb in the morning and one lamb in the evening. So victory was handed to the queen. Look, see, even God prefers lamb. What does any sore loser do? Said the king, because you were disrespectful and gestured like this with your right hand, let it be cut off, which it was. And the Talmud concludes that the priest deserved to be punished because according to Torah law, a goat, no less than a lamb, can also be offered as an alternative in the daily morning and evening sacrifice. What a strange story. What is this argument between a king and queen really all about? Many, 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 many generations later, one great mystic commented and said, this is the story of Jacob and Esau, which of course we're currently reading about. Let's consider what that means. A lamb is docile. It's a fluffy animal. It roams always as part of the flock. A lamb is a conformist. It goes with the flow. His bleat is soft as he quietly complies. A goat, on the other hand, is aggressive. A goat is always rebellious, doing its own thing. Threaten it and it can gore you with its horns. And goats are jumpers. They're always finding a way out of the enclosed pasture, while sheep remain content inside. Jacob, the Torah tells us, was a docile man. He was content. He stayed with the pack, his people, and he was someone with an unyielding commitment to God, and he was a conformist to all the dictates and mandates of his faith. Esau was a hunter, the aggressive one. He went it alone, over the fence, into the fields. We're told that Rivka, loved Jacob. The queen said, lamb is better. It's better to be a conformist. It's better to adhere unquestioningly to life's demands and to God's call. Life is full of risk. We need to concentrate our efforts on insulating our children, protecting them from exposure to a hostile world. The goat has no place in the community. If it jumps the fence, cut it loose, let it go. But then the verse continues and tells us, and Yitzchak, Isaac, loved Esau. The king prefers the goat, the nonconformist. That's where he insists we have to concentrate our energies. That's the soul we have to seek out, to nurture, to expose the latent potential within. Esau may be a goat, but he's not beyond redemption. So he isn't content with it. He likes to jump the fence. But what he does on the other side comes down to how you regard him and how much attention you pay to him. So what's better, lamb or goat? It's the big debate between the king and queen, between Yitzchak and Rivka. And to one extent or another, that debate rages on in our present day and age, between those who choose to concentrate all of their energies on the insular life, focusing entirely on those who are behind the ghetto walls, and those who insist we have to step out into the world and confront our reality. The queen insists the ghetto walls have to be built ever higher, and woe betide those goats that choose to jump over. Once you cross the line, you're on your own. We have plenty of Jacobs to work with. We can't chase after every Esau gone astray. The king insists, no matter what, that goat is part of the pack. Even if he jumps the wall, the family is incomplete when one brother has gone astray. Sure, we have a lot to do with the lambs, and we have much to do with them. With the Jacobs, it's a lot of work, but someone's got to go over the wall and after the goat. Because when you find him, there's something incredible inside him that will benefit the entire flock. Comes along the high priest, the bastion of spirituality, and declares, lamb is better. After all, God instructs that the lamb be brought on the altar. Service daily to him. This is with which we begin and end our day. This is where we have to concentrate our efforts. But the high priest was wrong, oh, so wrong. And he paid a heavy price with his very hand. You see, a high priest is an ambassador to the people. And as an ambassador, you have to do, in the words of Hillel, like our and the all original high priest, love peace and pursue peace. You have to show compassion to everyone. Yes, the end goal is to bring people back onto the altar of God, as it were, bring them closer, more in touch with their roots. But we don't limit that energy to just those who are already conformists. Both are equal. Both deserve our time, as they are integral components in the kaleidoscope of Jewish experience and endeavor. And thus the symbolism of cutting off his right hand is because the common analogy for the right hand, in the words of our sages, is the right hand draws near. It is the notion of bringing closer those who might have otherwise drifted, jumped the fence, abandoned the flock. When you lose sight of the message, that your paramount responsibility is to reach out with your right hand, not just to the Jacobs, but also to the Esau's, especially to the Esau's, then you forfeited your right hand. You've lost focus of the essential component of your ambassadorship. You know, at the very end of the portion, it tells us that Isaac sent Jacob to Laban, the brother of Rebekah, the mother of Jacob and Esau. The redundancy, yes, he sent Jacob to Laban, the brother of, in other words, his brother-in-law, the brother of his wife, Rebekah. And then the Torah says, who is the mother of Jacob and Esau? I mean, tell me what I don't, I mean, it's been mentioned right all the way through the portion. Rashi, the commentator par excellence, says, I don't even know what it's coming to teach us over here. In other words, what? The wording is redundant? No, I suggest to you that there is the point. Isaac sent Jacob to Laban, the brother of Rebekah, the mother of Jacob and Esau. Sure, Esau has become such a rotten child. Sure, initially we see that Rebekah loves Jacob. But you know what? She's the mother of Jacob and Esau. She's the mother of Esau as well. She loves Esau too. He is her child after all. And regardless of how far adrift, she's come to know that at the end of the day, like my mother has that sign still hanging in her kitchen from my earliest childhood, children need love, especially when they don't deserve it. That's the point. What we learn from our portion is that in the Jewish scheme of things, love for another is an absolute principle, not a conditional one. Esau, the goat, violates every one of his father's principles, discards the textbook of values of his ancestors, and still Yitzchak loves Esau. And he knows that there are many paths a child can take, right or wrong, will remain unknown, but rest assured that in the end, if you reach out to them, they'll find their way back. And ultimately, that's what Rebekah, mother of Jacob and Esau, came to discover as well. And maybe that's what Rashi means when Rashi says, I don't know what is coming to teach us. In other words, why state the obvious? Tell me something I don't know. Sure, of course, she's the mother of not just Jacob, but also Esau, because we have to love all and every child, not just the lambs, but every bit the goats as well. Shabbat shalom.